I was never good at anything. I was never picked for any team, and if I was picked, I was the first person cut. I got lousy grades in every class. I got fired from multiple jobs. I even got fired from a job pumping gas once. Can you imagine that? Being fired for pumping gas because you're no good. They came out and said, you're no good at pumping gas. How can you be no good? Little old ladies can pump gas, and here I was no good at pumping gas. Anyway, so I got fired. I went from job to job, and then I discovered that all people who are successful are excellent at what they do. You know the old question they asked Willie Sutton, the bank robber, why do you rob banks? He said, well, that's where the money is. Well, being in the top 10% is where the money is. So what you have to do is you have to pay any price and make any sacrifice to get into the top 10% in your field. Now, here's the good news. If you're doing what you love to do, you will want to be in the top 10% in your field. If you don't want to be excellent at what you're doing, it means you're in the wrong field. It just means that you're marking time, you're treading water. And there's a lot of people who are in their field and they do their job and they go home at night, they don't think about their work and so on. And this kind of an attitude means that you have no future. You have a very shaky present. That crackling sound you hear is the ice breaking under your feet, okay? And you have no future, because if you're not doing what you love to do and throwing your whole heart into it, you're just marking time. But everybody is designed so that there is something that you love to do that you can do well. And the fact that you love it means that you probably have the ability to excel at it. So make this decision to get into the top 10%. And let me tell you what changed my life. Here I was struggling in my late 20s, and I learned this. It was a breakthrough thought, is that everybody's in the top 10% started in the bottom 10%. Everybody who's doing well was once doing poorly. Everybody who is at the top of your field today was once not even in your field at all and didn't even know it existed. What that means is that if you're willing to pay the price and work hard and make the sacrifices, you can get into the top 10%. Now, how long does it take? It doesn't take a week or a month. Most people are really impatient. And to achieve mastery in your field takes 5 to 7 years. The time is going to pass anyway. The time is going to pass. 5 to 7 years from now, 5 to 7 years will have passed. The only question is, are you going to be at the top of your field, or are you still going to be down there with the mediocre 80%? And the wonderful thing is this is nobody's better than you, and nobody's smarter than you. If anybody else is at the top of their field, it means that you can be at the top of your field. Just go to them and find out how they got there, because they started at the bottom. Now, it may take longer for some people and less for others, but everybody who puts one foot in front of the other and keeps moving eventually gets there. And that's where all the rewards are. And not only that, that's where all the joy in life is. When you're really good at what you do, you feel wonderful about yourself. You're respected and esteemed by everybody around you. You can write your own ticket. You can open any door when you're good at what you do. Because you get up in the morning and you know you're good. And that is more important than the rewards that go with it.
You become what you think about most of the time. You become what you think about most of the time. So what do you think about most of the time? And we have interviewed thousands and thousands of successful people. Do you know what successful people think about most of the time? One study at the University of Pennsylvania, 350,000 business people, entrepreneurs like yourself, were interviewed over a 22-year period. And they found that the top 10% thought very differently from average people. The top 10% thought about what they wanted and how to get it most of the time. They're always thinking about what they wanted and how to get it. So what do you think the bottom 80% were thinking about? They were thinking about what they didn't want and who was to blame. This seems to be a natural tendency worldwide. We're always thinking about who is to blame for our problems. We're always thinking about something that happened in the past that we cannot change. So top people think about what they want and the actions that they can take now to get the things they want. And they're so busy taking action, they don't have time to think about anything else. Now here's another discovery, and I spend many hours teaching this, is that you can only think one thought at a time. You can think a positive thought or a negative thought. If you think a positive thought, it pushes out all negative thoughts. If you think a negative thought, it pushes out all positive thoughts. But if you do something repeatedly over and over again, you soon develop a habit. And top people have the habit of thinking a positive thought all the time. And what is the most positive thought of all? Thinking about what you want. thinking about the things that make you happy, thinking about the future and where your life is going. And so successful people are always thinking and talking about the future. They could be thinking and talking about the people that they love and their families and their home. They could be thinking and talking about business and money and success, but they're always thinking and talking about what they want most of the time. And so if you develop the habit of thinking about what you want, your life begins to transform. It's almost like a great ship in the ocean. As you begin to think different thoughts, the whole direction of the ship moves, and you go to a different destination.
See yourself as self-employed. What we found is the top 3% of adults in our society see themselves as self-employed. They see themselves as in charge of their own lives. When I started off my career as a young man, I was 21 years old, working as a construction laborer, living in a one-bedroom apartment, broke, taking buses 2 hours every morning to get to work and buses 2 hours to get back. I still remember that, and I still remember a light going off one evening. I was sitting there in my little apartment, in my little kitchen alcove, and I suddenly realized that I was responsible, is that I was in charge of my own life, that no one was coming to the rescue. And it was one of the great turning points in my life. So what you find is that all exceptional people are highly responsible people. They look upon themselves as self-employed. Sometimes I'll ask an audience, I'll say, how many people here are self-employed? And some people will raise their hand and some won't. I'll say, now what's the true answer to this question? And the true answer is that everyone is self-employed. The biggest mistake you can ever make is to ever think you work for anyone else but yourself. Even if someone else signs your paycheck for you all your life, the most valuable people in any organization are the people who treat the company as though it belongs to them. They see everything that happens as affecting them personally. They're not the 9-to-5ers, the no-hopers that say, yeah, well, I go to work. When I'm not at work, I don't think about my work. These people, somebody has told them that's a clever way to think. It's the way losers think. Winners think about their company, and when they're not there, they think about how they can do it better. When something happens in their company, they take it personally because they see themselves as highly responsible. As a result, they're paid more, they're given more educational opportunities, they're promoted faster, and these are the people that eventually, like cream, rise to the top of every organization and every industry, the top 3%.
There's a rule that says to achieve a goal that you've never achieved before, you have to develop a skill that you've never had before. You have to become excellent at something that you've not been excellent at before. There's always a price that you have to pay to achieve a new goal, and in our age, it's almost always the development of a new skill. So what is your new skill? When I work with companies, I say, what is the one thing that you offer to your customers that no one else can offer? Some of the other speakers will talk about this in great depth because it's one of the great questions. Why should somebody buy your product rather than buy the product of your competitor? But personally, you can ask, why should somebody hire you rather than hire someone else and pay them the same amount of money?
In order to achieve something you've never achieved before, you have to become someone you've never been before. And it's a really important insight, is the qualities that you need to develop, qualities on the inside to become a self-made millionaire, are incredible qualities that make you a vastly better person. Not only better in terms of character, determination, discipline, decision-making, strength, and so on, but they make you a far better person. They round out your character in a far better way. So the real payoff of becoming wealthy is not because you can eat more, because how many more meals can you eat? How many more clothes can you wear? But it's the kind of person that you become, and then the kind of people that you associate, the kind of life that you have.
So here's a simple way to become one of the highest paid and most productive people in society is do only number one tasks. Do only those things that are moving you every day toward the goals that you say you want to achieve. You want to earn more money, be happier, be healthier, move up in your business, have a nice house and a car, travel. Only do those things all day long. If you only do those things, the things that have great potential consequences, it transforms your life. Now here's another discovery. 95% of what you do comes from habit. And if you do something repeatedly over and over again, what do you develop? You develop a new habit. So what is the difference between people in the top 20% and people in the bottom 80%? And I've studied this for years. People in the top 20% have success habits, and people in the bottom 80% do not have those habits. So you can learn the habits of highly successful people. You can learn the habits of highly paid people. You can learn the habits of people who get into the top 10% and into the top 20%. And you can learn them with practice, because all habits are learnable. All skills are learnable. There is no limit to what you can accomplish if you just simply dedicate yourself to developing the habits of other successful people.
Here's what I'm asking you to do. Walk away from the 97%. Don't use their vocabulary. Don't use their excuses. Don't use their method of drift and neglect. Won't even walk around the block for their health. Won't even eat an apple a day. Won't even take the time to refine their philosophy for a better life. Walk away and join the 3%. Guess how many people can retire from the income of their own personal resources when it comes time to retire? Answer, 5%. In America, 5% of the people are independent. 95% are dependent. Take charge of your own retirement. You can multiply it at least by 5. Let the government take care of it. Some company take care of it. You got to divide by 5. I'm asking you, take charge of your own retirement. Take charge of your own life. It happens to be one of the titles of my own cassette program, Take Charge of Your Own Life. That's what we've talked about here all morning. Take charge of your own day. Don't have days like most people have. You'll wind up broke and poor. Pennies, no treasures. Trinkets, no values. Change it all. And it starts as simple as an apple a day. It starts as simple as the first book of your new library. It starts as simple as the first journal that you get, and make the first entry that when people see it will say, this is the beginning of a study of a serious student. They're going to be healthy. They're going to be powerful. They're going to be rich. They're going to have it all. Look, they've committed themselves to a whole new journey. I'm asking you to do that. But what's easy to do is what? Easy not to do. But walk away from the 90%. Walk away from the 97%. Walk away from the 95%. Don't go where they go. Don't do what they do. Don't talk like they talk. Develop you a whole new language. Be part of the few. Guess when I went and got this little book, Richest Man in Babylon? Guess when I went and got it? The same day I heard about it. I went and got it. Somebody says, well, Mr. Rohn, does that make you different than most everybody else? And the answer is yes. Somebody says, well, why is that? We don't know. What do we know? You don't know. I don't know. Nobody knows. All we know is some get the spark and say, I'm going to change my life. I'm going to change my health. I'm going to change my relationship with my family. I'm going to change everything. And if it starts with an apple, if it starts with a walk around the block, if it starts with a book, if it starts with a journal, whatever it starts with, I'm a candidate. I'm ready to go and change my life. I invite you on that journey. Once you look back on it, you will never turn back. You'll never go back to the old ways and the old language and the old neglect. Never. Cardiovascular problems alone in America create over 1,000 funerals a day. And 70% of it is neglect. I'm asking you not to hope they're going to fix this out here next year so that you'll be healthier. I'm asking you to pick up some new disciplines so that you will be healthier. Drive yourself to do it. Book by book, entry by entry. It's all available for you.
Successful people are not people without problems. They have, as a rule, just as many problems and largely the same kind as everyone else. The difference is that they learn to solve their problems. Successful living is nothing more than the ability to solve successfully the problems which are as much a part of living as breathing. The degree of our success will be determined by the extent to which we can solve our problems. If you can tell me what you want, I can tell you how to get it. The problem with the great majority of individuals is not with their ability to achieve their goals in life, but rather with the failure to understand two factors vital to successful living. The first is to make the decision as to what it is we want enough to give it most of our attention until it's been achieved, and to clearly define it. And the second is to fully understand that we have the ability to achieve this goal or we wouldn't want it in the first place. The next vital rule to successful living is to understand that our success is won or lost by our ability to serve others. We are interdependent, and it's just as impossible to succeed without serving others as it would be to live in our modern world without others serving us. Our rewards in life will and must always be in exact proportion to our service. It is the misunderstanding of this single law which, in my mind, is responsible for fully 90% of the frustration and discontent we see around us. Now, a lot of people don't like this law, if they're even aware of it, but not liking a law does nothing to change it. The basic laws of nature and economics are unchanging. If we're out of step with them, we are, as Thomas Huxley put it, checkmated, without haste, but without remorse. But to those who know and work with the laws, he said, they are paid with the overflowing sort of generosity with which the strong delight in strength. If a person doesn't like his income, all he has to do is take a good long look at his service. Look where you will find this law in undeviating operation. Our rewards will always be in exact proportion to our service. This is the law, then, that lies as the supporting structure of economics and personal well-being, so fix it in your mind. All attempts to sidestep or in any way avoid this law will result in frustration and failure. So this brings up the question, if what I want is more than I now have, how can I increase my service in order to earn it? Well, whom do we serve? We serve people. So let's take a moment to try to understand people. The more we understand them, the better we can serve them. I think of an adult human being as a grown child, doing his best to play for the first and last time on earth this game called life. The extent to which he learns the rules of this mighty game will determine his success. But right here we run into an historic and exasperating fact. People down through the centuries have, with the most amazing consistency, divided themselves into two groups. One group contains about 5% of any given population. The other group contains the remaining 95%. Neither of these two groups is any better than the other. But one thing separates them. The big group, the one containing about 95% of the people, never seems to get the word, while the smaller group, the 5%, does. Now, what do I mean by getting the word? I mean about 95% of the people never quite understand, emotionally or intellectually, that we as individuals control, to an altogether unsuspected extent, our lives here on earth. That each one of us is the architect of the structure fashioned by our years. You see, all of us want the same things, but only about 5% figures out how to get them. Within each of us burn two unquenchable ambitions: to serve importantly and to gain financial independence. Both of these worthwhile goals are within the reach of all of us, man or woman, but according to statistics, only about 5% achieve both of them. Why? Let's look at it logically. Every human being has a tendency to think, act, and talk like those by whom he is surrounded. This is environment, and it exercises an enormous influence on our lives. We've already pointed out that 95% don't seem to get the word in life. Then it follows that in the case of any given individual, the odds are 95 to 5 that he is surrounded by the larger group. And since a body in motion tends to remain in motion until acted upon by an outside force, that he will continue to conform to his group unless we can do a better job of serving him through knowledge. The failure of most people to live successfully is not caused by their lack of abilities, far from it, but rather in their failure to decide what it is they want, and understanding that our wants are governed by our talents and abilities, and that we are divided into two groups of roughly 5% and 95%, and that it's the 5% group which is successful. So here, let me give you a definition of success which, to my mind, covers the subject completely. Success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. That is, anyone who knows where he is going in life is a success. At the moment he makes the decision of what it is he intends to accomplish, of what it is he considers a worthy ideal, he is successful. Once this goal has been accomplished, he is again, by our definition, a failure, until he establishes a new goal toward which to work. To my mind, this is what we as human beings were intended to do, to go through life from one achievement to another, and to finally come to the end of our road here on earth, still reaching, still working toward a new and better plateau on which to stand. for this is to live and live completely, to know as much as we can know, to serve as much as we can serve, to accomplish as much as we can accomplish. Well, since success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal, why are we faced with only 5% who can be called really successful? Because the best estimates available tell us that only about 5% will ever decide upon and define the one thing they want. One thing, because we can only do one thing at a time. To my mind, the story of a person's life is the story of a quest, a search to which he devotes his life. We know that the happiest people on earth are those who know exactly what it is they seek and set boldly out to find it. And while we're all dreamers, the fortunate ones are those who have found a dream so exciting and worthwhile that they'll devote a part or all of their lives to making that dream come true. But while all dream, by far the great majority, that 95%, never realizes that a persistent daydream is often the point on which we should set our compass, the place toward which it is meant for us to journey. The tragedy is that the great majority shrugs off this built-in direction finder and returns to the wide, visible, well-marked road in life which they feel must be the best road because it carries the heaviest traffic. Well, let's make this point clear. The road in life with the heaviest traffic is not the best road to follow, for it is the road of the 95%. It is the road with no more opportunity and with 19 times as much competition. Of all the billions of human beings who've lived on Earth, all great advances, all great ideas have come from just a handful, a few thousand out of billions. Now, how have the people as a group reacted to the great ideas? Every great leader and thinker, from Socrates to the Wright brothers, has been scorned, ridiculed, poisoned, imprisoned, stoned, pilloried, burned at the stake, or crucified. Mankind as a group has made a consistently grisly game of tormenting his saviors. Why? Lack of information. Lack of knowledge. It comes from following the wrong crowd. What can we learn from all this as individuals? Two things. One, to amount to anything as individuals, we've got to be individuals. We've got to have individual goals, individual thinking, individual action. And two, we must never conform to the great mass of people. We must love them, help them, for our joy and success will be determined by the extent to which we serve them. But we must never lose our individuality and identity by permitting ourselves to be submerged in this suffocating sea of indirection and purposelessness. There's nothing wrong with emulation. In fact, it's a good idea, so long as we emulate a person who represents that which we wish to become, but never the crowd, never the 95%. We are what we think about. Our minds, our thinking controls our destinies here on Earth to a degree totally unsuspected by the great majority of people. When you think about it a moment, it becomes so obvious, so clear and simple. Well then, if we become what we think about, and if we can control our minds, we can pretty well tell our own future. And that's the point I want to make. That's what I meant when I said earlier that each one of us is the architect of the structure fashioned by our years. This means that if we're confused about what we wish to become or accomplish, our lives, our environment will mirror that confusion. It also means that if we know what it is we seek, that it must be accomplished. Barring an act of God or a catastrophe over which we have no control, we as individuals can call our own shots for the rest of our lives. We can know what it means to go through life from one success to another, to play life according to the rules and reap the rewards. We can know what it means to have peace of mind and live calm, cheerful, successful lives. You are at this moment the sum total of your thoughts to this point, for there is nothing else you can be. And 5 years from now, you can be and have anything you set your entire mind and heart upon. Succeeding in life has always been a matter of doing that which the great majority does not do. Now let's keep this in mind as we get into this business of goals. It isn't that I want to make an invidious comparison between the 5% and the 95%, not at all. That's just the way it is. And if we don't recognize it, it will be to our cost. At the beginning of this record, I made the statement, if you can tell me what you want, I can tell you how to get it. You see, the trick is not in achieving our goals, it is in establishing them. A ship would never leave a harbor if it did not have a destination. An industrial plant would never open its gates if it did not have a product or a purpose. Football would not be played without goalposts, nor would baseball without a home plate. Every business operates for a purpose. Every game has a reason. Getting back to the analogy of our ship, if you were to climb to the navigation bridge and ask the captain the name and location of his next port of call, he would tell you immediately. There's not the slightest doubt in his mind. Can you tell anyone your destination just as quickly and in one sentence? The captain of the ship knows that he can arrive at only one port at a time. He knows that it's impossible to arrive at two. Do you know that? He also knows that his destination will be invisible for fully 99% of his voyage, but he knows it's there and that he'll reach it, barring an unforeseen catastrophe, if he will just keep doing certain things a certain way every day. One fine morning, his destination will appear on the horizon. He'll sail into port, his voyage successfully completed. When his business has been accomplished, he'll then sail to another predetermined port of call, and this will take him and his ship from one success to another for the rest of both of their lives. By understanding that he can reach only one port at a time, the owner of a ship can, in the short space of a very few years, reach hundreds of ports successfully. There'll be problems, lots of them, but they'll be solved, and the ship will steam its solitary course over the deep oceans of the world, devoting its life to accomplishing its mission and contributing its share to the welfare and economy of the world. Men and women who follow this sensible, obvious, and meaningful way of life will do the same. But the paradox is that most are like ships without rudders. They're subject to the whims of wind and tide. And while they hope they'll one day arrive in a rich and bustling port, you and I know that for every narrow harbor entrance, there's 1,000 miles of treacherous and rocky coastline. The chances of their just drifting into port are 1,000 to 1 against them. These are the unfortunate people who, not knowing the rules, believe that circumstance controls our lives. They believe in luck and superstitions, fate, the breaks. They believe that success comes as the result of who you know, not what you know. And while they cling to their false alibis, life passes them by. For the rules of life are just, and they are checkmated, without haste, but without remorse. Now what about you? Remembering that the definition of success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal, what's the ideal toward which you are working, now, today, yesterday, and tomorrow? Can you write it in one sentence? Is your goal sharply and clearly defined? I mentioned on the first side of this record that I could tell you how you could be and have anything you set your mind on in 5 years. To better understand this, you must examine one of the most overlooked facts in the world. It is that every job, no matter what it may be, holds somewhere within itself the key to everything we want in life, the key to greatness. But we must look for it, and we must think. Decide to become a professional at your business. You see, we can either compete or create. If we compete with all the other people in our line of work, we must be willing to accept the same rewards. If that's what we want, fine. But if we want to become professionals at what we do, then we must create. And when we begin to do this, there's no limit to that which we can achieve. We hear a lot these days about a word called security. Everyone wants security, but not 1 in 10 can tell you what it is. Most people will tell you that security rests with a job. This is impossible. There is no such thing as a job that represents security. Anyone with a job can lose it for any one of 1,000 reasons at any time. There is only one place on earth you can find security, and if it isn't there, it isn't anywhere. It's inside of a person, never outside. If a man has security inside, where it belongs, his wife and children can feel it when he sits down to eat with them, and they're warmed by it. If a man has security inside where it belongs, you can see it walking down the street, and you can feel it when he enters a room. That's security, and you can't take it away from him. You can take away his money, his home, everything but a wife who's willing to start over, and most of them are, and drop him anywhere in the country. Go back in a year and he'll be doing just as well as when you found him the first time. You can't keep a good man down, no matter what you do to him. Like cream on milk. You can shake it all day, but just set it down for a while and it'll bounce right to the top again. This man or this woman has security, where it belongs. And do you know where it comes from? It comes from doing what we do for a living surpassingly well. It comes from being a pro in a world of amateurs.
Once you've decided on the most important idea to achieve your most important goal, then you have to concentrate single-mindedly on one thing until it's complete. Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, the richest man in the world and the third richest man, were at a dinner party at Bill Gates' home last year. And there were about 100 guests, and they were standing around at the reception, drinking wine and so on. And these three men, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and Bill Gates' father, are good friends. And so they were standing, talking, and one of the other guests came up and said, "Excuse me, gentlemen, you are three of the most important people in the world. What would you say is the most important key to success today?" And they stopped talking, and they all turned, and they said, "Focus. Focus is the most important quality for success today." We're so surrounded by so many distractions of so many kinds that the ability to focus is more important for success than any other quality. When you think about your goals and how to achieve them, it makes you happy. So people who are thinking about their goals are happy most of the time. They're more positive. They're more creative. They have better friendships. They have more energy. They get up earlier and they work harder because they have clarity about what they want. Only 3% of adults have written goals. And according to 75 years of research, people with written goals earn 10 times as much as people without written goals. People with written goals accumulate 10 times as much money over the course of their life as people without written goals. And what does it cost for you to write down your goals? It costs a piece of paper and a pen and about 3 minutes of your time. If you will write down 10 goals that you want to accomplish in the next year, you'll change your life forever. Everything that you write down, not type, but everything that you write down by hand is immediately saved to your subconscious computer, and your subconscious then works on it 24 hours a day. Give a clear deadline. Tell your subconscious when you want the goal to be achieved. And if you don't achieve it by the deadline, set a new deadline. But give your subconscious clear instructions so your child mind can work on it all the time. You spend 99% of your time thinking about yourself. So you are the most important person. But here's the point. How important you feel you are determines the entire quality of your life. When you feel that you're important and valuable, when you like yourself and respect yourself, you set bigger goals for yourself, you persist longer, you accomplish more, and more than anything else, the more you like yourself, the happier you are. The more you like yourself, the more you like other people, and the more they like you. So everything in life, and this was a great insight for me as a young man, everything in life can be measured by whether or not it increases your happiness. The only real measure in life is how happy are you. It's not how much money you earn, or it's not the car you drive, but are you a thoroughly happy person? So I began studying this subject early in my career, and I was amazed to find that your self-esteem is like the reactor core of a nuclear generator. It's the reactor core of your emotions, and your self-esteem determines the entire quality of your life. Now, the more powerful you feel, the more you like yourself. The more you like yourself, the more self-confidence you have. The more self-confidence you have, the bigger goals you set, and the more you persist, and the more that you achieve. And everything starts with what's happening inside of yourself. So here's an interesting question. Which comes first, the thought or the emotion? Well, when I first learned this, I was quite amazed that it's always the thought. It's the thought that comes first, and it's the way that you interpret this thought to yourself that determines the emotion. If something happens and you interpret it in a positive way, you feel happy. If something happens and you interpret it in a negative way, you feel negative.
Nature is neutral. In other words, nature doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care if you're tall or short or male or female or black or white, educated or uneducated. Nature doesn't care. All that nature cares is that you do what successful people do. It's like making a recipe. Nature doesn't care if you follow a recipe. If you follow the recipe exactly, you get the dish. Nature doesn't care who's doing it. And that's the wonderful thing about our society. It's basically like justice. It's blind, is nature doesn't care. In fact, there are a lot of people who are not as smart and not as talented as you who are doing vastly better than you, not because they're better, but because they're just following proven success methods. There's nothing that will make you madder than to see somebody who's dumber than you, who's making more money than you.
There are many things in our world that we cannot change. So don't waste any time worrying about things you can't change. Focus on the things that you can change. And the only thing that you can control is the way you think. If you think differently, you feel and you act differently. If you feel and act differently, you get different results and you achieve different goals. So you'll find that top people throughout history are always focusing on the opportunities of tomorrow, whereas average people are always thinking about the problems of the past. All the psychologists and psychiatrists and counselors in the world are helping people talk about their past and what happened in the past and why they feel unhappy about the past. But you can't change the past. The only thing you can do with the past is learn from it and then let it go. So you learn from the past and let it go, and then you turn toward the future. There's a wonderful line, and the line says that when you turn toward the sunshine, the shadows fall behind you. When you look toward the future and all the possibilities for your life in the future, you automatically become happy. The negative events of the past that you can't control fall behind you. And that is your job.
Fear of failure is the greatest single obstacle to success in adult life. And it's not failure itself, because each one of you is a professional failure. Each one of you has failed over and over and over again. Isn't that true? All of us fail. All human beings fail over and over. 9 out of 10 things that we try don't work out the way we expected. We have failures in relationships and in jobs and in careers and investments and everything. It's not the failure that holds you back. The failure makes you smarter. We say that it is the fear of failure, not failure, that holds you back. And the way that you overcome failure is you never consider the possibility of failure. The rule is this, is there's no such thing as failure, there's only feedback. Is when you try something that doesn't work, you get feedback, not failure. And recognize that most things you try aren't going to work the first few times. So what you do is you say, oh, that's an interesting bit of feedback. And you pick yourself up and you move forward and you have more feedback and you move forward. To become a self-made millionaire, you're going to fail over and over again, year after year after year. But your brain has a cybernetic mechanism, which means that every time you try something, you get feedback, which makes you smarter. And when you try something else, you get feedback, which makes you smarter. And eventually, you reach the point where you're too smart and you stop making mistakes. You start to do more and more things right and fewer things wrong. But you can't get there unless you have experienced the failures. Henry Ford once said that failure is merely an opportunity to more intelligently begin again.
One thing that only you can do is to learn. No one else can do it for you. No one else can give it to you. Only you can learn new things through hard work. And when I discovered the idea of continuous learning, I thought it was a miracle.
Take every course that you possibly can. The courses and seminars that are available to you in your field that are given by professionals that are courses that have been developed over years and years and years. They have been tested and tested and tested. The person who is talking to you for several hours has spent thousands of hours learning their subject. They have dry tested this or done test runs with thousands of other people. When you take a course, you can learn enough information in 1 or 2 days, more than you could learn in 2 or 3 years or maybe even a lifetime, all distilled and put together. People say, I can't afford a course. You cannot afford not to buy books. You can't afford not to go to courses. Some years ago, I had a dentist, and he was a very successful dentist. I was recommended to me by a friend. And this dentist retired at the age of 53. And just before he retired, he sold his practice for about $2 million. Just before he retired, he told me why. He said about 8 years before, he had attended a dental congress in Hong Kong. This is from California. He'd flown all the way to Hong Kong to attend this International Dental Congress because there were specialists giving private lectures, sort of plenary sessions on the side. And he attended this session, and it was on a particular technique of cosmetic surgery that this dentist had developed that no one else knew, where you could basically straighten out a person's entire front jaw so they look beautiful at a very low cost, at a very high level of effectiveness. He came back and he began implementing this in his practice. People began flying from 500 and 1,000 miles away. Every dentist sent their families, members, and themselves to this dentist. He was able to charge whatever he wanted to charge. He said 8 years later, he retired as a self-made millionaire at the age of 53 to enjoy his money for the rest of his life from what he learned from one session at one convention at one course. Now, that is a true story, and maybe it's an exception, but you can never tell where the information is going to come from.
Becoming a pro isn't difficult. It comes from knowing what to do with time. It comes from knowledge, planning, and working. First, knowledge. This means learning everything we can about what we sell, learning everything we can about people, since that's who we sell, and learning everything we can about selling, since that's our profession. What we sell, who we sell, and how to sell. Those three subjects would fill a large library, but we can take things one at a time, and by devoting an hour a day to study, we can become outstanding professionals in 5 years or less. And it's the professionals in this business who can write their own tickets, good times or bad. They can live where they choose, and being professionals, work when they choose. Second, planning. This means writing down the specific goal we're now working toward. It means writing in detail about the first port of call we want to reach, realizing that we can only reach one at a time. It means selecting the income we feel will represent financial independence to us. Once this has been selected, we know exactly what we must do in order to reach it. As soon as our first goal has been reached, we can set a new one. The person who does this is the person people call lucky. Good things just seem to happen to him. The so-called breaks start coming his way. But it's a result of planning and working positively that attracts the good things to us. I can't emphasize too much the importance of describing your goal in detail. If it's a beautiful new home, get the actual plans, or at least an elevation drawing of the home, and carry it with you so that you can look at it regularly. If it's a certain amount of money, write down the specific amount for the coming year to the penny, and then work your plan. Whatever your goal may be, write it down in detail. Then you're like this ship. You're on course, and you'll reach more successful ports in a few years than most men do in a lifetime. And third, working. Working more than the average, if we're going to achieve more than average results, is necessary, of course. But with proper planning and with knowledge, it seems easy. Moreover, to work, we need energy, and energy is inextricably linked to desire. Unless we have a desire to do a certain thing, we find ourselves without the energy. But you will never find desire without energy. Once our goal has been crystallized in our minds and we realize that we become what we think about, our doubts vanish as to whether or not we can achieve our desired ends, and with the picture of our dream in our mind, we have abundant energy. Compared with what we ought to be, we're only half awake. Our fires are damped, our drafts are checked. We're making use of only a small part of our possible mental and physical resources. Stating the thing broadly, the human individual thus lives usually far within his limits. He possesses powers of various sorts which he habitually fails to use. He energizes below his maximum, and he behaves below his optimum. And then he wrote, "Excitements, ideas, and efforts, in a word, are what carry us over the dam." He goes on in this excellent essay to point out that we have deep reservoirs of abundant energy that we habitually fail to use, and that by pushing past the first false feeling of fatigue, we will find an exhilarating second wind that will take us to our goals. This is why in studying the lives of the world's great men and women, we find they seemed to be indefatigable. Work meant nothing to them, because what they were doing, where they were going, filled their entire worlds. Frequently, people find it difficult to establish a goal toward which to work. Realizing that we cannot be successful without a goal, here's a good way to solve the problem. Get off by yourself, and where you can think without being disturbed. Then, write on a sheet of paper a complete description of the person you would like to be, and the things, in being this person, you would have. Once this has been done, start acting the part of the person you wish to become. Carry as often as you can a clear mental image of the person you want to be, and begin to be that person. Soon this will become so knit with habit, it will lead you without fail to the goal you seek. You see, when you begin to do this, you're using your greatest power, your mind, and you will become what you think about. The only thing about a man that is a man is his mind. Everything else you can find in a pig or a horse. Think about that line until you know what it means. The only thing that sets us apart as human beings is our divine minds. Everything that means anything to us, our love of our families, our faith, our dreams, our talents and abilities, our religion, everything we know, is connected to us solely through our minds. Our minds represent our hope and our future. Yet, as a rule, it is the last place the average person will turn to for help. Your mind contains riches beyond belief, but you must prospect this rich and largely unexplored continent. And the only way it can be prospected is by systematic study and systematic thinking. Your mind is like a muscle. It will develop only to the extent that you use it, no more. By devoting an hour a day to study, you're building your mind into a powerful and creative servant. If you only do this 5 days a week, it comes to 260 hours a year. That's 1,300 hours in 5 years, or the equivalent of 162 8-hour days devoted to study and research. Believe me, if you'll do this, in 5 years you'll be one of the most accomplished professionals in your field, and you'll have the world on a string. You will virtually be able to write your own ticket. The average man works 8 hours a day, about 50 weeks a year, for 40 years. That's time enough to become great at anything. The time will pass anyway. We might as well reap the rewards. So now, let's sum up and reduce the whole thing to a workable formula, a set of rules for this game of life that cannot fail to take us to where we wish to go. The first and most important thing to remember is the rule that controls our life. We become literally what we think about. This means that we must establish a worthwhile goal toward which to work, a goal that will occupy our minds most of the time. This goal should be written out or illustrated. We should look at it and restate our purpose every morning, every night, and as many times during the day as we can. We must fully understand, emotionally as well as intellectually, that whatever it is we set our heart upon will become real in our lives. We must also remember the law that lies as the basic foundation for all economics and personal well-being as well. Our rewards will be in exact proportion to our service, and if we want to get into the top 5% of the people, we must often cut ourselves away from the effects of our environment and become individuals with individual goals, individual thinking, individual actions. We must realize that our daily work contains more opportunities than we could develop in a lifetime, and that our job contains within itself the key to greatness, the road to everything we could possibly want in life for ourselves and our families. We must realize, too, that security can be found in one place only, inside of us. If it isn't there, it isn't anywhere. And the only road to security lies in doing what we do for a living surpassingly well. And lastly, that we must become professionals at what we do, and that becoming a pro involves knowledge, planning, and working. Knowledge of what we sell, who we sell, and selling. Planning by establishing the goal, which automatically establishes our work pattern. The great salesman is like the great golfer. It looks easy the way he does it, because it is easy the way he does it. But it took time, dedication, and work in its accomplishment. Is it worth it? You bet it is. P.G. Hamilton once wrote, "Let's be different. A strong life is like that of a ship of war, which has its own place in the fleet and can share in its strength and discipline, but can also go forth alone to the solitude of the infinite sea. We ought to belong to society, to have our place in it, and yet be capable of a complete individual existence outside of it. And remember the strangest secret, will you? You are now, and you will become, what you think about."